Good evening, everybody, members and guests, everyone who's joined us this evening for this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel. It's the 18th of January 2022, 7 o'clock, so we can make a start. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices down the main staircase opposite the lifts in the foyer. Assembly is to be in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise you when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber, or even cross the road, I would imagine, looking at the fog that we've got out there. Would everyone please present, if they've got their phones with them, ensure they're not used to make or receive phone calls or text messages or any other kind of mobile communication whilst the meeting is in progress. This meeting is being live streamed for members of the public, and so we welcome any members of the public who are joining us this evening. It will also be recorded and subsequently broadcast on the internet. Does anyone here intend to film the meeting? I can't see anybody, so I think we can skip over the filming details. Speaking item E, speaking under Rule 20.1, I have requests to speak from the following members: Councillor Ruth Bailey, Councillor Helen Whitehead and Councillor Mike Garner. Are there any other members who wish to speak under Rule 20.1? Thank you very much. We will come to you, of course. Public speaking, I haven't received any requests from members of the public. Have you, Giles? No, thank you. So we move then on to the substantive part of the agenda, dealing with the apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Huxley, who's being substituted by Councillor Everett. Welcome, Councillor Everett. Councillor Patmore being substituted by Councillor Yates. Welcome, Councillor Yates. And we have apologies from Councillor Coleman Cook. Are there any other apologies to be registered? I'm going to check with my glasses, can't see. Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest members wish to make on the items this evening? Now this one is a new one for me because I wasn't actually here at the last meeting, so I was unwell, but our next agenda item is item 3, minutes of the previous meeting, to approve the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel meeting held on the 23rd of November in 2021. As I say, I wasn't here, but can I have a proposer, please? Thank you very much, Councillor Rettigan. And a seconder, please. Thank you very much, Councillor Austin. Do members agree? Agree. Thank you very much. Charles, is it necessary for everybody to keep the mask on? Yes, unless that's people. Okay. We are blessed this evening with the presence of Kent Police, who are with us this evening. Can I welcome on your behalf, members and officers, Chief Inspector Matthew Smith, who's going to make a presentation looking at the subject of modern slavery in Thanet. So, Chief Inspector Smith, thank you very much for coming. You're very welcome. We look forward to hearing what you've got to say. And just as a by the way, it's entirely up to you if you keep the mask on. If you feel easier speaking without it, please do remove it if you wish.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you for the invitation to come here and speak this evening. I'll just quickly introduce myself. It's Matthew Smith, Temporary Chief Inspector, District Commander for Thanet. I've been in post since October. I'm aware that I'm probably one of a number of Chief Inspectors you might have seen throughout your time here at Thanet. I've been here since October and I'm here for some months to come. My background prior to coming to Thanet is as a detective investigating serious and complex crime across East Division, domestic abuse, hate crime and other vulnerability associated offences. So I'm going to talk to you this evening about human trafficking and modern slavery in the Thanet district and provide some examples and case studies of some partnership working since my arrival in Thanet. The presentation will probably take about 15 minutes or so, but please do prompt me if I start going over and I'm going out of time. So what we're seeing here on the board is the Kent Control Strategy, and that is the overarching strategy which directs our police response towards those crime types which cause the most harm to the most vulnerable in our communities. And it includes exploitation, serious violence, abuse, high harm crime and counter-terrorism. Modern slavery and human trafficking is on the far left in the exploitation category, but actually it probably spans, in its most serious cases, all of the control strategy. And the centre of that is child-centred policing. Kent Police does have a dedicated modern slavery and human trafficking investigation team out of the headquarters, which works alongside the National Crime Agency and ensures safeguarding, enforcement and education around this subject. Local cases are also investigated by the local CID teams across the division and at Thanet also. Our frontline and investigative colleagues within Kent Police are all trained to recognise the signs of modern slavery and human trafficking, some of which I'll talk about throughout the presentation. We have had specific training, and there is a knowledge hub on the Kent Police intranet for officers to refer to should they need to. The focus of Kent Police is to ensure safeguarding and removal of those victims being exploited while seeking out those who prey upon the vulnerable and bring them to justice. So when we say modern slavery and human trafficking, what do we actually mean? Well, the United Nations defines modern slavery, modern day slavery and human trafficking as a recruitment, transportation, transfer, harbouring or receipt of persons by improper means for an improper purpose, including forced labour or sexual exploitation. And the 5 categories which we refer to are domestic servitude, forced criminality, labour exploitation, organ harvesting and sexual exploitation. And I'll just touch on those to put those into context. So domestic work is a sector which is particularly vulnerable to exploitation and domestic slavery because of the unique circumstances of working within a private household combined with a lack of legal protection. Domestic workers perform a range of tasks in private homes, including cooking, cleaning, laundry, taking care of people, running errands. And some domestic workers also live in their employers' homes and are often considered to be on call 24 hours a day. The pay is often very low, with wage payments frequently delayed, and some domestic workers may not receive payment at all and be kept in poor living conditions, with documents withheld, such as their passport. Forced criminality, that is a category which incorporates a proportion of young people. So people under the age of 18 are classified as children in the UK, and therefore it's not surprising to see many young people get caught up in aspects of criminal exploitation. Children are particularly vulnerable to exploitation by individual opportunists, traffickers and organised criminal groups. But they're also vulnerable to exploitation from less sophisticated groups and more locally based groups, such as those involved in county lines drug supply. Other forms of forced criminality are counterfeit DVD selling, bag snatching, ATM theft, pickpocketing, and cannabis cultivation, to name a few. Labour exploitation, so that's forced labour which is sometimes hidden but most commonly occurs in plain sight. Victims come from a variety of backgrounds. They may be UK citizens, EU migrants, or those from outside the EU. People who are subject to forced labour are typically made to work in areas such as agriculture, construction, service industry, manufacturing, and hospitality. They may also be victims of debt bondage, where they're tricked into working for little or no money to repay a debt, and perpetrators will use different tactics to trap the victim in an endless cycle of debt which will never be repaid and can even be passed on to their family. Organ harvesting obviously sounds very alarming, but I can reassure you that there's not been a case of organ harvesting reported in the UK, but is used as a threat towards victims to control them. It is unfortunately something that is seen overseas. Sexual exploitation is something that can affect adults and children alike when it comes to modern slavery and human trafficking, and it can be defined as a person deceived, coerced or forced to take part in sexual activity. And when we're talking about modern slavery and human trafficking, we're talking about prostitution, brothels, escort agencies, massage parlours and the like. So on the presentation here are just some of the many indicators that a person may be a victim of modern slavery. There is a long list, but I've just picked a few out here, which some of you may recognise. As I touched on before, modern slavery can happen in plain sight, but there are some things that we can all look out for here. So as I touched on there, people may present without documents or documents that are false or forged. They have a lack of freedom of movement. They may be fearful, anxious or withdrawn when talking to people in a position of authority, probably because they're under threat of being reported to those authorities by the people exploiting them. The people may appear to be working under instruction. They may have to resort to crime in order to eat due to receiving no money. They're unlikely to have an employment contract, be forced to work long hours and poor conditions, may live within the workplace and not be dressed adequately for the work they do, for example, not being provided adequate PPE. Poor, degrading living conditions, and may be forced to open bank accounts or credit agreements. They're just some of the signs that may and should cause alarm bells to ring should you encounter people displaying those signs, because they may well be victims of modern slavery and human trafficking. So this slide here is a breakdown of reports of modern slavery and human trafficking offences in Thanet over the last 6 months. There are a total of 12 offences reported in Thanet during that period. They can be broken down into 4 cases of criminal exploitation, 3 of which were drug supply, 5 labour exploitation cases, including 2 restaurants, 1 nail bar, 1 shop and 1 general labouring, 1 sexual exploitation case which related to a child exploitation investigation, 1 case of domestic servitude, and 1 further case of suspected trafficking of a victim. That trafficking didn't take place in Thanet, but due to the method by which we report crime, this was somebody who travelled from overseas and reported the offence in Thanet. Therefore, Kent Police recorded the offence in the Thanet district. And to put that into context, those numbers account for approximately 11% of the recorded modern slavery human trafficking offences for East Kent. And it's for the reason I just outlined in terms of where we record the offence that Dover, for example, may see a high proportion of cases of human trafficking, because that's where the offence is reported on a person coming into the country despite the offence taking place elsewhere. So how have we been working with partners in Thanet to safeguard victims and investigate cases of modern slavery and human trafficking? Well, as I said, I've been Thanet District Commander since October, and since that time I've been really impressed with the multi-agency partnership working across various areas of policing, but including modern slavery and human trafficking, 3 case studies of which I'll touch on shortly. So the multi-agency task force is a really valuable tool, a really valuable asset. Those partners, Thanet District Council, DWP, Kent Police, Fire and Rescue Service, Social Services, Gang Master and Labour Abuse Authority, HMRC to name a few, all working together is a real advantage. And one of the main advantages is the ability to share information quickly and reach joint decisions with a joint agreed intended outcome, so that we can quickly safeguard potential victims and disrupt and deter criminal activity. Another advantage of the joint working is for the ability of different agencies to use their own powers to tackle the problem from different angles. So HMRC, for example, will have different powers they can rely on to Kent Police to hurt criminals financially. So as an example, the DWP officer embedded within the multi-agency task force from the DWP Economic Serious and Organised Crime team is a real advantage, as it allows for that real-time access to information systems where there's an immediate risk of where there's an immediate threat, risk or harm, or a threat to life, such as a high-risk missing person linked to county lines, which may be linked to modern slavery. The DWP embedded officer is trained to the same level as a detective, so PIP level 2 is what we refer it to, which provides an advantage in terms of interview support, dealing with complex benefit offences which may come to light during the course of our investigations, and allows us to work together, as I say, to tackle this criminality from different angles. Those cases which are joint worked on can be progressed quickly, with necessary agencies involved at an early stage, which means a range of offences can be reviewed using the specialist knowledge of partners with agreements as to who's going to take primacy of which part of the investigation, all with that common goal of safeguarding victims. So as I'm sure we'll all agree, partnership working is key to policing and community safety, and this has certainly been what I've seen in Thanet. And I'm just going to touch on 3 examples now of some partnership working in relation to modern slavery and human trafficking. The case studies I'm going to relate to are current or recent investigations. I have therefore sanitised the specifics of the locations, and there are no names of people involved, but hopefully from this you'll be able to get a flavour as to the 3 cases that I'm talking about. One was Margate, one was Broadstairs, and one was Ramsgate. So the first case study related to some intelligence received that illegal migrants are working and living in a restaurant, and they're subject to poor paying conditions, those warning signs that I spoke about earlier. And this was some community intelligence that had been received. So a multi-agency visit took place soon after that intelligence was received, and that multi-agency visit included police, Thanet District Council licensing, Fire and Rescue Service, the Gang Master and Labour Abuse Authority, and research and input intelligence from the Department of Work and Pensions. On attendance at the location, we were allowed in without any resistance, but in the basement area, 6 rooms had been constructed, and all rooms were in occupation with beds, clothing and personal possessions found. Thankfully, no evidence or concerns in relation to modern slavery and human trafficking were reported at the time by the persons present. However, coming back to that joint working, KFRS, the Fire and Rescue Service, did serve a restriction notice on the business due to the unsafe living conditions, which meant that no persons can sleep in the basement from that point forward due to the lack of fire escape, fire safety, for example. Those people were at risk by those living conditions. And we didn't just walk away and leave it there. It's obviously important to follow that up. So a further multi-agency visit took place on the 3rd of November with Revenue and Customs and Police. And on that occasion, 2 people located during that visit were taken to Margate Police Station and were interviewed by Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs due to their links to an ongoing investigation. On these visits, all victims were offered safeguarding. They were spoken to privately through use of interpreters where required to ensure they had the opportunity to report any concerns or offences. Nobody at that stage reported being a victim of modern slavery or human trafficking. In those circumstances where somebody doesn't come forward and say they are a victim, but we believe there is sufficient evidence or intelligence to say that they are, we can refer them and their case into the National Crime Agency without their consent. So we don't necessarily always take somebody's word for it, because we do understand through the fear and the coercion that they may not feel in a position to report that they are indeed a victim. And that makes it difficult when we're looking at crime statistics nationally. It's difficult to measure how much human trafficking and modern slavery is ongoing, because victims are quite reluctant to report it. The second case study came from an investigation that was taking place by our child protection team at Thanet. They came across some information which gave them concern that a food outlet was putting young female employees at risk of sexual and labour exploitation. Again, multi-agency meeting and a multi-agency visit took place, and that took place in November 2021. Excuse me. And during the joint visit, a KFRS, Fire Rescue Service, again undertook an inspection with regards to safety aspect of that building, and several areas of concern were found. No smoke alarms, large quantity of cooking oil stored, general disrepair and leaks. This was an area where food was cooked and prepared, so clear safety hazards there. Of concern, one member of staff appeared to be coached into providing answers by another male who was the manager. Again, looking back to earlier, acting under instruction. That person was taken aside and spoken to privately with the use of an interpreter, and they gave an inconsistent account as to how they came to the UK and what they were doing at that premises. Immigration officers conducted a check, and it was found that that person had a current asylum application pending, which actually prevented him from working in the UK. This person said that he knew that working there was against his conditions, and he was removed from the premises, and the immigration are likely to issue the manager of that premises with a substantial fine regarding the employment of that individual. As a result of that visit, valuable intelligence and information was gathered. It was being taken forward by DWP and HMRC in a parallel investigation. Again, all victims were offered safeguarding and support and signposting to those services which may assist them. However, no offences were reported. The third case study relates to forced labour, and that was a call from a member of the public who'd had some manual labour done at his property, and he was concerned for a member of the traveller community within Thanet. And the report was that the 2 males had another male with them, and they appeared to be working that person in a way that was characteristic of modern slavery. Multi-agency task force began an investigation, and through working with the Community Safety Partnership, we located the male within Thanet in a noticeably run-down accommodation in comparison to the other accommodation around him, and appeared to be isolated from the rest of the community. It actually transpired that that individual was wanted by police for a fraud of over £50,000. So he was arrested. However, it did give us that opportunity to remove him from the situation, speak with him as a victim, potential victim of human trafficking and modern slavery, with that open mind of, yes, he might be a suspect for an ongoing offence, but also he may be a current victim of modern slavery. He declined to report any concerns to us. However, we've shared the information with the relevant authorities. So in summary, despite none of those three incidents resulting in anybody declaring they're a victim of modern slavery and human trafficking, for the reasons that I spoke about earlier, they may well not have been, but also they may well have been reluctant to. What it does demonstrate is the importance and value of partnership working, communication and collaboration in order to respond quickly to any concerns raised within the Thanet district. The examples also demonstrate the value of community intelligence, reporting those things which just don't seem right, that you're concerned about in the community, thinking about those indicators I referred to earlier. So I just wanted to highlight a few ways which you or members of the community can report concerns around modern slavery and human trafficking. There is a modern slavery helpline that can be reported through the National Crime Agency, who are the lead agency. It can be reported to the police by 999, of course, in an emergency, 101, or on online reporting. And Crime Stoppers is an option for those who wish to remain anonymous. And we've also, within the last couple of days, launched My Community Voice, which is a direct communication method between members of the community and the police. And they can report any concerns to their local ward PCSO or officer through that method. And equally, we'll be using My Community Voice to continue to share the good work and praise that is ongoing, not only for the police, but for our partners. So hopefully that's given you an insight as to the partnership approach to modern slavery and human trafficking in Thanet, and thank you for the opportunity of sharing that with you this evening.
Chief Inspector, thank you very much. Members got questions or comments they'd like to make? Chief Inspector Smith? Yes. Councillor King, please.
Thank you. Yeah, it was very interesting. I'm just always worried about all the car wash people. Are they, is that legitimate? Are they there voluntarily?
The car washes are one of the locations that we, car washes are one of the locations that we do look at on our all-out days or days of action around modern slavery and human trafficking. That is a place that is frequently used for victims of modern slavery and human trafficking. I'm not aware of any cases within the Thanet district itself, but certainly nationally, car washes is a place where forced labour, people are sometimes kept in poor living conditions with wages withheld. So when we are looking at days of action and community intelligence, we do visit car washes to see who's working there, check their ID and things like that. So it's certainly a location we do focus on.
Thank you. That was really interesting. I'm wondering how you work with health providers, with particularly on mental health, I'm thinking, but also obviously people who are living in poor conditions and whatever, and that their health is likely to suffer. What sort of links do you have, and how do you support people in that way? Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very important question. For those in immediate need of care, those in immediate crisis and immediate care and control, we do have policing powers to detain them and seek immediate care for those. But for those who perhaps, in one of those examples, say for example that last scenario where that male was living in poor living conditions, isolated from his community, if we had concerns around his mental health, we would, alongside the modern slavery report, create an adult protection referral, which will go to the centralised team, and then that opens the door to social services, mental health support services. So we will always share relevant information with partners should we have concerns for adult or child mental health cases.
Councillor Boyd.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Matthew, for your presentation. I just wondered, the three examples that you gave were around predominantly sort of restaurant and public, what you could say public places. During the sort of the lockdowns, did you notice much of an increase in reporting of perhaps the ones where it's I'm going to get the phrase wrong, this, what was it, domestic serve? That's the one, what you said. Did you notice an increase in the reports of that because more people were at home, so they might be more able to acknowledge what their neighbours were up to or certain things in their local neighbourhood?
Thank you. The trouble is with that type of offence is whilst you're in the home, it's difficult to report, much like domestic abuse. So during lockdown, we saw a decline in the reporting of domestic abuse. because people didn't have the opportunity to get out and seek sanctuary and report it. I don't have the data to hand in relation to domestic servitude during the lockdown, for example, but I would take an educated guess that we probably didn't see an increase for the same reasons around domestic abuse, that the opportunity to report it is problematic when you're still remained in the same house, and it is an area that's nationally underreported for those reasons. So I can't comment on the specific data, but unfortunately.
I think I was more alluding to, rather than the victims themselves reporting it, but the almost witnesses, so the neighbours, in terms of, and also perhaps, you know, what is there more that people can do to be more aware of it, really? So how, because obviously you said about the warning signs to us and stuff, but is there any kind of work around how do we promote it to the public to be more aware about reporting things like that and noticing the signs?
Thank you. Yeah, there was a national campaign recently by the National Crime Agency around, and there's some really useful videos on their website about those warning signs. You know, who is it that's actually washing your car? Who is the au pair next door that never actually leaves the house, and you can hear the shouting? And they arrived several months ago, you know, in suspicious circumstances, and they've never really been seen again. So there is material out there to help people spot those warning signs, but perhaps that's something I can take away through our press office and our modern slavery human trafficking team, to see if there's any more sort of a refreshed media strategy we can put out around that, just to raise awareness within the community.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Chief Inspector, do you have any idea how, I know you mentioned earlier that Dover tends to be higher because it might be reported there even though it didn't happen there. Do you have any ideas of how this area fits with the rest of East Kent or West Kent, if you're in touch with your colleagues across the border?
Thank you. So Thanet accounted in the last 6 months for about 11% of East Kent's figures. So that's Ashford, Canterbury, Dover, Folkestone and Thanet are the 5 districts that we refer to when we're talking about East Kent. So Thanet was 11% of that. I did have some data, or do have some data in relation to North, West and East Kent. East Kent does have the highest number of reports, simply mainly attributed to the fact that we have the port itself at Dover and the Channel Tunnel where people are intercepted, or we have people landing on beaches or jumping out of lorries within East Division. So they are taken to the Kent Intake Unit or East Kent Custody Suites, whereby they then report. So East Kent will always have that higher proportion, but Thanet itself was 11% of the last 6 months.
Thank you. Do you have any more comments? Okay, members and guests, I think we're ready to resume. We now move to the agenda item number 5, the budget 2022-23, and I'll now call upon Councillor David Saunders, who's going to present the report for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And for the benefit of committee members who weren't there on Thursday last, I'm going to crib the introduction that I used at the Cabinet meeting because it does detail some points that are within the report, but you may find easier if I relay them verbally. Just a few months back, we were forecasting a significant budget gap, but with a planned and cautious approach, combined with an efficient savings plan, we have been able to balance our budget. Despite what may seem like a lengthy and complicated process, this level of planning is critically important. It's how we continue to deliver the services that matter to people and protect and support our most vulnerable residents. Planning our finances in this way means that we are on the right track for balancing our budget in the coming years. Our balanced budget position has been supported in part by the very welcome additional funding that has been provided to us by government next year. However, much of this funding is temporary, and therefore this Cabinet proposes to use these monies in a financially sound way. For example, we plan to use the extra one-off new homes bonus windfall to pay off debt and hence putting us on a solid financial footing as we prepare for the reform of local government funding and the uncertainty this brings. Despite the additional funding we have received, it has been necessary to find budget savings in order to balance next year's budget. One of our priorities throughout the budget setting process has been to protect jobs as much as possible, and as such, a key component of our budget strategy has been to look for savings from vacant posts. I am therefore pleased to present savings of £250,000 have been found from this review. In addition to this, we have also found almost another £400,000 from further savings, efficiencies and income generation opportunities. Finally, the proposed increase in council tax at £5 per band D equivalent property represents an increase of less than 10 pence for each household. As I've said, this report was considered by Cabinet on Thursday last, the 13th of January. The Overview and Scrutiny Panel is invited to comment on the attached report. If need be, the Cabinet meeting on the 27th of January 2022 can consider any views from the panel. Thank you.
Councillor Saunders, thank you very much indeed for that. We've got 3 members who've asked to speak under Rule 20.1. Councillors Bailey, Whitehead and Garner. So first of all, can I call on Councillor Bailey, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge the fantastic job that's been done by the finance team. It always amazes me how it always, we're always on edge about getting the budget balanced, and they always come up with it, and it's a brilliant job they do. And I also appreciate the time they take to explain it very clearly in all the briefing sessions. There's so many components which have to be considered in order to balance the budget, and I appreciate that priority has to be given to the most essential headings. However, as a ward councillor, I'm also concerned with fighting the corner of my residents about issues that directly affect them. And this may not seem significant in the grand scheme of things, but I am again banging the drum about the Viking Bay lift. I did raise the question of whether money had been set aside for the continuing repairs and maintenance of the Viking Bay lift, which was the subject of much controversy last year. I didn't really get a straightforward answer. It was suggested that money could be provided through maybe through negotiations with Southern Water. But while that's all well and good, this does seem a bit tenuous and in maintaining this important facility. And I'm not sure personally that we should be relying on potential donations for running essential services. I'd be much more reassured to see a definite allocation within the budget itself for this vital facility. Thank you.
Councillor Whitehead, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to echo Councillor Bailey's sentiments in relation to finance. They do a fantastic job in very, very difficult circumstances at times, and the briefings have been very much appreciated. However, in relation to our proposed budget, I am here tonight to argue for an investment of the majority of the new homes bonus into the purchase of property to extend our in-house temporary accommodation service on several grounds, and all costed within our current budget with no extra expense. I'm confident of my argument and of the necessity of bringing it. It was argued by Cabinet in the last Cabinet meeting that ring-fencing money to pay down non-urgent debt is the most fiscally responsible thing to do. But what I wish to discuss is that fiscal responsibility is far more complicated than simply looking at debt. At point 310 in the Cabinet papers from the meeting on the 13th of this month, we discussed the ongoing pressures of temporary accommodation and homelessness. Pressures that are now even more severe due to cuts at a county level, which the leader has herself acknowledged to the extent of writing a letter to explain what a significant impact these cuts could have, and to insist that it is essential that they are reversed. In light of this, it is even more urgent to consider how we can address our needs for temporary housing and homelessness services long term. All members of our previous Labour administration are now very experienced councillors. Moreover, the only councillors within our chamber who had to make complicated social and fiscal decisions during the first wave of a pandemic. We have known and experienced extraordinarily complicated situations, and have learned local governance to a significant level of detail, due both to commitment and to the circumstances under which we served. That experience has served us well, and has given us insight and understanding that I believe is worth recognising. The simple narrative is that debt is bad, and that paying it off is good and sensible. This is very true on one level, but local governance is never that simplistic. The £549,000 that has come from the new homes bonus is significant in many ways. It holds particular significance to me considering that this money has come to us not via largesse or random allocation. It has come to a large extent due to the extraordinary work of housing. During the period of the Labour administration this grant allocation covers, housing brought 252 empty homes back into usage, a huge achievement for this area. Contrary to popular belief, Thanet tops the chart in Kent for empty properties being brought back into usage. We are very good at this and work very hard at it. This has now been recognised as part of the new homes bonus, and the hard work of housing has brought new funding into the council, and a significant amount at that. In a moral and fitting sense, it seems only right that the money that housing have brought into the council go toward alleviating some of the extraordinary pressure on housing, both financial and otherwise, and this proposal does both. In using a significant part of the new homes bonus to extend our in-house temporary accommodation service, which was designed and planned to reduce out-of-area placements and to reduce the costs of using private providers for our temporary accommodation needs, we would not only be recognising the outstanding work of our officers directly, but also saving money in a more concrete and ongoing way than simply allocating it to pay down loans that we routinely acquire at a low rate and that we are already well accustomed to managing. Every householder knows the logic of this. In not investing further in our in-house provision, we are, in effect, choosing to pay private providers for our essential services, rather than pay ourselves to provide the same service. Rather than providing for ourselves and investing, we are promoting reliance on external providers. Our continuing costs in terms of providing temporary accommodation are an ongoing and extraordinary cost. They may not be an accrued debt, but they are a future cost that is ever increasing and is unlikely to subside as property and rental costs in Thanet rise. While I held the housing portfolio, Housing were already looking at the potential to expand our in-house temporary housing to offset these ongoing costs and to be able to provide ongoing local support for our residents who are unfortunate enough to find themselves homeless in the current crisis. A potential property to add to our local temporary housing has already been located, and whether it is this property or another, the longer we delay in purchasing property for this purpose, the more we will be paying out in an ever-increasing market. The realities of this situation are stark and make it clear which the best course of action is. As reported by the Land Registry, annual property inflation over the past year in Margate alone has topped 14.4%. If, rather than using it to address a social need now, we set this money aside to pay debts that are not yet mature at a time of historically low interest rates, we will in effect be accruing greater debt due to property price increases. Add to this the ongoing costs of providing private temporary accommodation, not only across this period, but also in the future when this property would be actively working to mitigate those costs, and we are not only accruing further expenditure, but also losing the ability to pay back into the general fund, both to maintain stock and expand it, so that in the future no resident need be placed out of area and suffer the disruption that entails. This is not a debt versus spending argument. It is, in fact, a clear demonstration of how to avoid future debt via safe and sensible investment, both in our housing and in the future of our community. Especially as modellings of costings have already been done by this council and established that in-house temporary accommodation is cheaper than our current usage of private providers. That is worth a huge amount to our community, to our residents, and ultimately to us as a council, and it is both logical and factually supported. I have seen it argued that it is disrespectful to officers in putting forward this proposed amendment. I argue the opposite. Not only is this process, I have always respected and consulted with officers on policy and proposals. So not only do I know this to be a feasible way forward, I also know that in using the majority of the new homes bonus for housing, we are directly recognising the efforts of officers that brought this funding into council in the first place, as well as directly serving our residents and reducing the distress that COVID and financial changes have caused to our community. This is not and should not be a political decision. It is a logical, financially sound and socially and fiscally responsible one, and I hope very much that Overview and Scrutiny discuss it in such a way. Our residents would want us to, and our ability to make unified decisions based on practicality rather than politics is why we are here and what we were elected for. I thank you and thank the Chair.
Councillor Whitehead, thank you very much indeed. That was a very detailed argument and well made from where you're sitting. I wonder if I might ask you, this might be slightly unusual, but Councillor Bailey, equally well made point, but a lot shorter and can be noted. I wonder if a recommendation is made to Council to consider the points that you've raised, would you be able under those circumstances to provide a written copy of what you've had to say so that everybody who's considering it can actually remember it all and more effectively discuss it? So if it is brought forward, would that be doable?
Yes, of course. No
Thank you.
at all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Chair. And of course, like Councillors Bailey and Whitehead, I thank the finance team for all their hard work they've done producing this budget, and also the portfolio holder, who I'm sure has worked very hard with them to do this as well. I've got a couple of points I'd just like to raise that I hope you might consider in any discussions. The first of these relates to the purchase of electric waste vehicles, which has previously been discussed on a number of occasions. And on each occasion, we've been told that we don't currently have the infrastructure at the depots to support them. I hope we'll all agree that we will both want and need to do this as soon as possible. So I'd like to ask, or like you to consider asking, what work has been started in terms of minimum putting together a business plan for the implementation of the required infrastructure, and ask that if required some funding be put aside to enable that to happen. I know a number of other councils in Kent, including Swale, are commencing use of electric waste vehicles this year. And I'm sure there's information that can be gleaned from those that are ahead of us in doing this. Another area I'd like to be considered is obviously the generation of income from other sources. And one source that's already been mentioned, of course, is Southern Water. And I know the Friends of Botany Bay and Kingsgate have persuaded them to fund a litter picker for a few months. And I'm sure we all agree that we as a council, and the leader will, continue to seek much greater reparations from them to fund services along the coastline that they've so badly damaged. And as well as these maybe including new toilet blocks along the coast, there are also some maybe ultimately self-funding initiatives that any funding could be used for, i.e. maybe coastal wardens to enforce our PSPO, which could become self-funding, and enforcement functions relating to litter and fly tipping, which I know was discussed at full council recently. Lastly, I'd like us to consider something a number of other councils, including Bristol City Council, have done, which is that after initially setting up a small fund of up to 100,000 to train up maintenance staff to fit heat pumps, solar panels, etc. in council properties, something that I know we're looking to do. They've then gone on to use external apprenticeship levy funds to take on more staff and expand what would ultimately become a self-sustaining service, which, as well as obviously improving our housing stock in terms of the climate emergency, also would be able to provide some new jobs as well. So thank you.
Councillor Garner, thank you very much. Do any members wish to raise any points for discussion from either of our speakers? Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Chair. So the Labour Group would like to put forward the following motion. Am I okay, Chair, to hand out physical copies of the motion?
Be easier to read. Thank you.
Pass them down.
Yes, I've got it here. Yeah. Yeah, I've got one, thank you. Yeah. Yes, of course.
Thank you. So this motion looks to address, as Councillor Whitehead has already mentioned, urgent housing needs. But not only that, climate change, providing more provision for the climate emergency, which we've declared, and addressing Councillor Bailey and Councillor Garner's point of fixing public lifts. So I'll read the motion first. The Overview and Scrutiny Panel invites Cabinet to adopt the following budget amendments. Allocate up to £125,000 from the New Homes Bonus allocation for the capital works required to the Ramsgate East Cliff and Viking Bay coastal lifts to ensure they're in full working order for the foreseeable future. Number two, allocate the full remainder of the New Homes Bonus allocation as capital to provide additional in-house temporary housing accommodation. And lastly, transfer £200,000 from the Risk Management Reserve to a new Climate Risk and Opportunity Reserve. So let me just briefly explain this motion. As already highlighted here tonight, there is a New Homes Bonus allocation of funding worth £549,000. We believe that using this to pay off debt does not create best value for TDC. and the majority can be spent where it belongs. As Councillor Whitehead has already said, this is housing. We believe that this money can be invested in new temporary housing accommodation to reduce the high ongoing costs that the council must pay for providing temporary accommodation to private landlords. This makes good financial sense, and we believe it pays for itself. In addition, with the New Homes Bonus funding, we have listened to residents and believe that up to £125,000 should be allocated to repair the Viking Bay and Ramsgate lifts that are much needed for our disabled and elderly residents. Onto the climate change reserve. So the creation of a climate change risk and opportunity reserve is one that would allow TDC to be bid ready for future grant climate opportunities and would enable grants when, and hopefully when provided, would enable internal project management, which is much required in council when grants are awarded. So on this climate change reserve, let me just highlight these important points. No new money is required. We are taking £200,000 from risk management reserve and putting it into a climate risk and opportunity reserve. We are enabling our climate engaged officers to tap into funding to allow them to access this reserve. However, using this reserve still requires the relevant internal sign-off. Lastly, climate change, as we all know, is a real risk to the council, and maximising our grant income will lead to reduced costs in the future, we believe. And that's the motion we would like to propose tonight. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Just for clarity, please, are you recommending to the members of the panel that we take this on board and send it back to Cabinet for them to consider, or are you suggesting that this is an amendment to the budget? Because I'm not quite sure you can do that here.
Point of order, Chair. We can't amend the budget here, so it can only be a recommendation.
Hence the question. I just wanted clarity. Thank you, Councillor Everett. So, members, yes, Councillor Everett.
I'd like to second the motion, Chair, please. And I'll speak to it if that's agreeable to you. I think, first of all, I'd like to congratulate Councillor Whitehead and Councillor Yates on their speeches. I think they've been very clear, and I think everybody has heard the passion that Councillor Whitehead brings to this particular issue, not just tonight but previously, and I think it's an excellent proposal and is clearly contained in the Labour motion. We have engaged in this process in the appropriate way. This is the right place for us to bring forward proposed budget amendments, and indeed the auditor has previously remarked that there is a need for challenge to take place in the public forum, not behind the scenes. We've had some excellent briefings. Mr Blundell gave a great briefing to the Labour group, which we very much appreciated, and we have worked with officers behind the scenes on each of these proposals, so we are satisfied that they are robust and viable and could be introduced into the budget without any problems. And tonight we are asking Cabinet to consider them at its meeting following this, following tonight, subject obviously to the support of the Scrutiny Committee. So I say to the Scrutiny Committee, we are asking you to put these as proposals for Cabinet to consider. And I think that would be the proper way for us to do it on a cross-party basis so that they go to Cabinet. Obviously, it's up to the Scrutiny Committee to decide whether they support these proposals, but I hope you will agree that this is the proper way for us to conduct the business of the Council. And I'm not going to dwell on what Councillor Whitehead and Councillor Yates have already said, but I will say something about the Ramsgate lift, which won't surprise any of you. I think that along similar lines to what Councillor Bailey has said about the Viking Bay lift, there has been a lack of commitment to bringing that lift back up to standard and back into use. And I understand that part of the reason for that is financial. It's because the cost of doing so to the Ramsgate lift is more significant than doing it to the Viking Bay lift. And I just want to say that whilst I think that the Viking Bay lift, which we absolutely support as part of this proposal, is very important in terms of access to the beach, I think the Ramsgate East Cliff lift is an iconic structure which is dear to the heart of many people in Ramsgate and which cannot be left neglected and out of use in the way that so much of our infrastructure in the past has been due to financial difficulties, financial shortages. So it is a priority. The public has shown that in the petitions and other representations that they brought to the council. I understand that Cabinet may have ideas about other ways of funding these things, and that's fine. But what we want to do is create a budget as part of this process which gives some certainty to the people of Ramsgate that this issue is going to be addressed. And the proposals are framed with a certain amount of flexibility as to the amount of money in order that Cabinet and officers can bring their judgment to that. So I very much hope that the Scrutiny Committee tonight will support these proposals, and I hope that Cabinet will take them seriously and engage in them on a cross-party basis, because that's the way we should do business as a council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Everett. Members, any other comments? Councillor Austin, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm personally very interested in the proposals around the new homes bonus, and it makes logical sense to me. Obviously I haven't seen all the figures and so on, but it makes logical sense that we should use that money to invest in housing provision. Also, as a Ramsgater, I'm very keen to see the Ramsgate lift refurbished, although I rather suspect that the amounts of money that will be required will be way in excess of what we're looking at here. But you may have more detailed information on that than I have. I'm very much hoping that the proposal around the climate reserve would encompass some of the proposals that the Green Group has been looking at, that Councillor Garner mentioned. And if that were to be the case, then I would be thoroughly behind recommending these suggestions to Cabinet.
Any other comments? Councillor King.
Thank you. I obviously support what has already been said, but I just wanted to highlight as well, is it making financial sense to invest in extra temporary housing because of the costs we're paying out for that? There's also a sort of emotional cost to the families when they are moved out of areas, which I've come across particularly in casework lately. So I think it is a very important field for us to invest in. Thank you.
You've heard the comments that have been made. Would you like to respond? We have the proposal put and seconded. Members have commented. Would you like to respond to anything that you've heard?
Yes, I certainly would. Thank you for the motion. Thank you for the presentations. On behalf of the Cabinet, I can confirm that we will take these away and give them serious consideration. Obviously, we need to get into dialogue with the finance team. It was intimated that we had a strategy, and we have been working on a strategy with regards to the lift. The leader has been working very closely on that, and to be fair, it was hinted that it did involve the town councils and other stakeholders. So we'll need to look at the situation that you've presented seriously. What I would say is that we were looking at a significant budget gap that we're looking to close, not only in the forthcoming financial year, but with regards to future years. Obviously we need to sit back, consider what you proposed, and look at the overall situation. What I would say is that it's not where you start, it's where you finish. And we need to consider all of the other elements that we've been discussing with finance that go into the monies that we've allocated in the specific positions. But we will take this away and give it serious consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders, for your willingness. Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Chair. Are we not supposed to vote on these proposals? We're not supposed to vote on these proposals first.
You're working me with your foot, aren't you?
Yeah, and there are three items here that perhaps some of us may agree with, A and B and not C and all combinations thereof. So are we voting separately for these three different issues? Thank you, Chair. Dear.
Thank you, Councillor Piper. I was just about to say, thank you for your willingness. I think I got that far. Thank you for your willingness for Cabinet to have a look at this and consider there are the three, and presumably that being the proposal from Councillor Yates and seconded by Councillor Everett, you would look at all three of them. But I do need to ask members if you agree to forward this proposal as it's been printed and shared with us, and also not forgetting Councillors Garner and Bailey's contribution linked to these. Do members agree to forward this to Cabinet for their formal consideration at their meeting next week? Can I have a show of hands, please? Apparently I missed your hand, Councillor Curry.
Early for the, just before, yeah, thanks.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, basically, sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say that I believe the new homes bonus is an opportunity for the council to improve these particular proposals put forward, and I support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hands again, please, just so we can make it formal. Yes. Those against? Any abstentions?
One abstention. So that's agreed.
I didn't hear you, sorry.
That's agreed.
It is agreed. Cabinet will look at this at their next meeting. Thank you very much for all the contributions.
Chair, could I...
Were there any other comments that members wished to make on item number 5?
Yes, please, Chair. I just wanted to pick up, following the mention that Councillor Garner made about previous comments that the Green Group had made at Cabinet about ways of generating more income. I just wanted to make sure that the recommendation that we had made about working more closely with town and parish councils, obviously that's come up with regard to the lift, but that's about finance. We were talking more about delegation of work and activity to town and parish councils, some of whom are very keen to work more closely with the district council and might be able to do work more cheaply or more effectively as being more local. We'd like those recommendations still to be borne in mind. I realise that this can't be a formal proposal, but we are a little concerned that in the euphoria that follows the balancing of the budget and the greater income than we had expected, those sensible and pragmatic suggestions may be forgotten. So alongside getting the most we can, reparations from Southern Water and generating income from other sources, we really would recommend that Cabinet bear those possibilities in mind as well and pursue that as a course of action. Thank you.
Could I just ask a question, please, Councillor Austin? Is the suggestion that town and parish councils might do it cheaper than the council currently pays, either its own staff or outsourcing? And does it rely on the district council giving the money to the town and parish councils for them to do it? or would it be anticipated that those councils would have to increase any council tax raising powers that they have in order to be able to pay for it? I'm sorry if that's a complicated question.
I quite understand. I think what we're suggesting is that whole area be explored further. Different possibilities. Obviously, as you know, Ramsgate Town Council already does a considerable amount of work that Thanet District Council used to do. Some of that is formally delegated. Some of that is simply picked up because Thanet District Council does not have the capacity to do all the work that is required in Ramsgate. So I think what we're asking for is a closer working relationship with town and parish councils and exploring other possible ways in which work might be shared to the benefit of all.
Thank you.
Caught me on the hop there. Thank you very much. Yes, Cabinet can take it away, and indeed I can confirm that the leader and Cabinet are currently in a number of conversations with the Corporate Director of Communities with regards to a number of elements, some of which you've covered there. So we'll certainly take that away and carry on with those dialogues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Saunders. Again, showing the willingness of the Cabinet to have a further look. Councillor Austin, are you content to accept that as a response, or did you want to go through the process of a formal motion? All right. Thank you very much. I think that concludes agenda item number 5. Thank you, everybody, for all the contributions and the discussion. Thank you also, I know it's been said a few times already, to the finance team and the portfolio holders and all those who've got, you know, elbow deep in trying to get this to work. Thank you for your work so far, and no doubt still work to do before we sign off the budget later on this year. So is there anybody who's here now whose work is done, who might like to go? Okay. Yes, I'm just checking that in case anybody wanted to go. Okay, then we move to agenda item number 6, which is the HRA bundle. Councillor Saunders, I guess you're presenting this for us again this evening as well.
Thank you, Chairman. I thought you were offering me the opportunity to leave the meeting. This is a covering report that you have before you this evening, which covers next year's HRA budget, and that is underpinned by a 4.1% increase in rents for next year, the majority of which I am reliably informed will be covered by increased benefit or universal credit payments to our tenants. This rent increase is needed to continue to drive the HRA to a balanced and sustainable financial position, and also to finance our ambitious house building programme and housing investment plan, which obviously we need to take into account the motion that has been presented to us this evening in that consideration. The report was considered by Cabinet on the 13th of January, and the Overview and Scrutiny Panel are invited to comment on the attached report. If need be, again, the Cabinet meeting on the 27th of January 2022 can consider any views from the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, have we got any comments for Councillor Saunders on agenda item number 6? Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Saunders, once more. Agenda item number 7, then, the review of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel work programme. Do any members have any comments they'd like to make about the work programme? I think most of us are fairly familiar with it now over the last few months. Any additions or comments members would like to make? Thank you very much. And agenda item number 8, then, is the forward plan and exempt Cabinet report list. Anything the panel would like to raise on agenda item number 8? Thank you very much, everyone. Well, that concludes the business for tonight's meeting. I declare the meeting closed at 10 minutes past 8, and the live stream of this meeting will now conclude. Thank you, everybody, very much.